Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Spinistry Live. I am your adventure and race host, Kevin Lee. Today we are going over some of our findings from our trip to Colorado to start to put together our cross Colorado routes and where we are at in that process, what we found, what we still need to do, and give you all a quick overview of that, what our next steps are, and we will have a bonus section at the end for those that are interested in the minutia and the technical stuff, a tool of the trade for creating routes and scouting, pre-scouting, I guess is a better way to label it. It's not going to be for everyone, but if you like putting your own routes together, I think you might find it a useful tool as well. So let's just dive right into it and give you an overview of what we have in mind for our cross Colorado routes, what we have done, what needs to be adjusted, and then what still needs to be done. Please, at this point, if you haven't yet, do like this video, subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave comments along the way, particularly if we have open questions and you have the answers, or if you see something silly we have in mind and you want to give us a heads up of, hey, don't do it like that. Let's expand this map a little bit. So this is a combination of everything we've mapped out. Some has been verified and good to go. A lot of it, as a matter of fact, and we'll show you that shortly. I've also left some examples of what we've originally mapped versus where we had to make some alterations. And then I will also show exactly what we have left to do for this to be complete. But what we have in place now is a lot of mileage in Colorado that's good to go and is just plain glorious. We're most likely going to try to put together a Club Spinistry weekend before the snows hit. Don't know what the time frame is on that just yet. I do know it's going to take at least one more, possibly two more trips to finalize these routes. And when we do that, probably on that second trip, I'll see what fine sanding of the edges we need to do, and we'll probably schedule a Club Spinistry weekend for me to finish everything. So what we have here, we have our what we call our southern east to west or west to east all the way across Colorado route. And then our north south south north route as well. Obviously, these will not be 12-month of the year routes in Colorado. We think the southern one will be a definitely most of the year route. We do have one pretty high spot there that when everything is snowed and iced over will not be viable, definitely. But the rest of it is good much of the year. And there's nothing that says you have to do the whole thing in one spot. The short version is our east to west route is done, except for this far eastern end, basically here from 385 to Elkhart. We need to verify that very short section there. Everything else east to west, west to east is complete all the way across the state. So most likely when I go back up to Colorado sometime in the next week or two, this will be the first thing I verify so that we can call this a complete route. The north-south, let's call it the south-north route, starting basically at Capulin, New Mexico, Capulin Volcano. This is good all the way past Canyon City to Lake George at this point. But realistically, we know this little loop here is good. I'm confident in this loop, so we're actually pretty confident all the way to Georgetown. So what needs to be verified, and this will be my next trip, is basically from Georgetown to Laramie, Wyoming. We'll go a little bit more into detail. I don't think we're going to go all the way to Laramie, but I'll explain that shortly. What I do want to go over are a couple of modifications that we've done along the way from the original plans or routes that we originally had working. And this one here, this applies to both the east-west and the north-south. This section here, a couple years ago, I found this route originally. And when I scouted it then, right around here somewhere, the road was washed out. So I had to double back to this 441 and hop on Highway 160 and get to the La Vida Pass. This is a really cool road, and there's a property for sale that I just wish I could own up at the top of the pass. But anyway, that's a different thing. So originally, this route didn't work because of a washout here, but that was a couple years ago. And I think somewhere along the way I had read where this route was repaired. I was really looking forward to getting back on this and not having to use the highway. So I scouted down this way because we made this part of our north-south route as well. I scouted from Gardner, this loop here and backwards, and went over my La Vida Pass again. Really cool stuff. Started playing around, and this was just a fantastic dirt road, and it's washed out again. So for my north-south route, I've mapped out a new go-around that I need to verify this. It's a pretty short section, and it looks pretty solid. I don't think it will be a problem, but before I make it official, I definitely want to look at that. For the east-west folks, more than likely, we're just going to send you down 160. Do the go-around that I did before, where we catch this 441 onto 160 and do a few miles of 160 and catch that. But if this ends up being really cool all the way around the mountains, we may make that the east-west go-around. Probably not, because quite frankly, when I was driving through this section through here, there was obviously, I mean, the road was in perfect shape the other day when I drove this, but there had obviously been a lot of work done clearing rocks and down trees and stuff like that. And there had obviously been fires in this area previously. So I think it's pretty steep on both sides here. I think the area is prone to washouts and mudslides and things like that right now. So my guess is this section of road is probably messed up after each and every storm. So most likely east-west, we'll just have you catch 160 and keep going this way. And this is all rock solid through here. This section leaving Pagosa Springs to Durango is sublime. Here's our one high section here, and I can't remember the name of this pass. I think it's Elwood Pass, maybe. This is one short section I haven't been on yet. It is a Jeep road, and higher elevations there. I think that gets up around 11.5 or so. There is also a back onto 160 over here into Pagosa Springs, a go around if the mountain pass isn't your style there. But except for this far eastern end, I would call our east-west route actually complete now. The north-south, once I verify if this is good from La Vida to Gardner, we are, and this is just phenomenal stuff through here, all the way into Canyon City. I have all three of these up because I want to show you our findings. So the original route that I mapped out left from Canyon City and went up Phantom Canyon Road through Florissant and stayed on the eastern side of things into Bailey. That was the original plan. And the idea was, hey, let's have the route as close to Denver and Colorado Springs as we can. So if people just want to catch parts of it or don't have time to do the whole thing, they have easy access to parts of it. There's still some validity to that. But quite frankly, what I discovered over here on the west side of Phantom Canyon Road with Shelf Road, and anyone that's done the Crippler is already familiar with this. That's coincidental on my end. I did not realize that this was the same stuff that they use for the Crippler. It makes sense because you're going into Cripple Creek from Canyon City. But Phantom Canyon Road and Shelf Road are amazing. And then our little section that we've added onto it over here going through Red Canyon, it's just stuff I'm absolutely in love with. And from West Cliff to Canyons, I mean, this is, you cannot beat this riding is ultimately what this boils down to. And all that into Lake George is fantastic. This was what I originally had scouted or had mapped out once I decided that I wanted to include Shelf Road and Red Canyon. And this is what I originally mapped out. And once I scouted this, this is absolutely amazing stuff. And this is what our add-on module at the end that goes over tricks of the trade, tools of the trade is going to address. Scouting this was just amazing. Unfortunately, coming into Shawnee to Grant, this section of 285 I was less than enthralled with. We'll go into those details again on that in that add-on module. I'm still going to most likely offer this as an option because this is some amazing riding here with some just tremendous views. Again, coincidentally, great minds think alike. Here's the Colorado Trail here, but that's closed to cyclists is my understanding. And this is the Colorado Trail reroute, which explains why I saw a bunch of cyclists on there that day. This is a very cool section here. Again, this short section, I think it's 6 or 7 miles from Shawnee to Grant on 285. I'm not completely comfortable with, so I wanted to look at an alternate version that comes up to Grant the other way on 285. This side actually has shoulder. This side does not have shoulder. What we have mapped out here, I like the looks of, and that's what our tricks of the trade video is going to be about, is how this route came about and how we kind of pre-scout it before we go up there. And then this is paved here, but it's a fantastic ride up to Guanella Pass. And so far, I went up to the top at the pass. I haven't been down the other side yet. I'm quite confident that at least into Georgetown, the route will be solid after Guanella Pass. And then everything past Georgetown through Boulder, Longmont, through the Red Feather Lakes area and up into Wyoming is unverified territory for me. So this will be the focus of my next trip up again sometime in the next week or two, is to verify as much of this as possible. Basically, could have stayed up an extra day or two and tried to squeeze some of this in, but the fires are up in this area as well. We were dealing with enough of the smoke as it was. It was probably best for me to get home, take care of some paperwork, get the Pan Racer Challenge kicked off, and look at the maps. That was really important to me. Our internet connection was spotty at best this week, so I wasn't able to look as closely at the maps as I wanted to for reroutes and adjustments. But all of that said, from Capulan Volcano into Georgetown, Colorado, I would call it a solid route one way or another. Now we just have to determine what the final version of that will be. And one more trip I should be able to verify into Wyoming. More than likely, I'm going to, originally, I had it set to end here at the Vidawu. Somebody tell me how to pronounce that. I apologize. Evidently a pretty well-known rock climbing area and some cool stuff here and campgrounds right there. And it's just off the interstate. So that's a convenient stop point. Had several people comment that once I was going up that way, hey, you need to go all the way into Laramie. Coming from this side, I don't seem to be able to find a way to get all the way into Laramie. I don't think this road goes through up here. And it looks like really the interstate is the only way to get into Laramie, which may still be viable on a bicycle. I know some areas of the country expect you to ride the shoulder of the interstate to get across the state, and maybe this is one of them. I'm going to lean towards this being the start point because it's easily accessible. And again, the other end to be the Capulan volcano area. Right now, I have it going into the town of Capulan. What would be really cool if we're able to arrange it is to, at least maybe for a group ride someday, going south to north, have everybody start at the top of Capulan volcano and ride the road down. That would be kind of cool, but that's just a pie in the sky thing at the moment. So that's the quickie overview. I think we got a lot accomplished. I'm very excited by these routes. Um, the east to west is a totally different flavor than the north to south. Obviously, there is some commonality in the Trinidad to La Vita area, but outside of that, they are independent of each other. At this time, I don't expect to do a north end east to west. The reason for the south end east to west, this is actually part of our going to California route here, actually coming up from the Capulan volcano. So this section over here is new, but the rest of this is part of our going to California route, which goes through Utah and into Arizona now. Still need to verify it from Grand Canyon to California. We have the route all the way from Capulan to Texarkana, Arkansas, down to Shreveport and into Mississippi. So that's continuous all the way. We have the route from Jacksonville, Florida area through Georgia and halfway to Alabama. So we still need to figure out this Alabama Mississippi connection to Louisiana. Hurricanes that keep piling up on us don't seem to help that. So we're going to concentrate on Colorado the rest of this year, get this finalized, try to do a group, Club Spinistry group something or other, probably sometime mid to second half of October, potentially, unless the snows come early. And that's the update on where we are at with our Colorado routes presently. Again, if you want to see a trick of the trade, stick around. If you haven't already, like I mentioned earlier, please do subscribe to our channel, like this video, and I sincerely mean it, leave comments and questions so that we know what we need to address to help you guys out as well. Okay, and I'd mentioned earlier I'm going to show everyone one of our tricks of the trade related to some of the results of our Colorado scouting. Basically, this section between Lake George and Grant that we already had laid out and that I scouted the other day, and it's amazing. It's glorious. It's fantastic. Unfortunately, it has a section of two-lane highway, a 285 between Shawnee and Grant that I consider less than ideal. Two-lane, no shoulder, high speed, lots of traffic. From a Texas point of view, it's not a section of road that I would ever consider riding myself. But I did check Strava heat map when I got back to the cabin that night to see what alternatives there might be. And according to heat map, there are quite a few cyclists that do ride that section of 285, which initially is somewhat surprising to me, but I do realize that Colorado is more cyclist receptive, generally speaking. That said, I was on that section of 285 several times over this past week, and I didn't see a single cyclist on it. So I'm definitely looking forward to some feedback from people that are familiar with that area, that section of highway. My expectation is most people wouldn't be comfortable riding that. So we're going to try to come up with an alternative. I have a couple of different alternatives in mind, but this is the one that's kind of at the top of the list right now. And I'm looking forward to scouting this out. This tool that I'm about to use and demonstrate here, for areas that I'm already familiar with, I don't have to know, not necessarily know like the back of my hand, but that I'm pretty familiar with. I don't usually go to this level of detail before I actually go out and scout it. But if it's, 12 hours of driving away and in an area that I don't know very well or has a lot of public lands, and this route does use a lot of public lands. Sometimes the maps are less than accurate for those. So what I'll do an online preview utilizing Google Earth that at least lets me before I go out and scout and maybe waste a bunch of time just to run into a bunch of dead ends. I can do a virtual scout this way. So here's the route I mapped out on Ride with GPS. I'll show you a little bit more detail here. Basically, it's using this, and excuse my pronunciation, Tarryall Road between Lake George and Jefferson. I believe that's what that area, yeah, Jefferson up here. And then it goes up to Grant on 285. Tarryall Road is a paved road. Now, that said, the section that I originally mapped out coincidentally, it was dirt roads over on this side here through all of this and coming on onto Tarryall Road and down to Lake George. While I was scouting that, I noticed a bunch of bike packers on that route. And that kind of threw me for a loop, a lot more than usual. Everywhere I've gone on this trip, I've seen a cyclist or two. I literally saw dozens on that day. But after I ran into the issue on 285, I started scouting around, and you'll see right here, that's the Colorado Trail. And that was one of the things I checked on Strava heat map. It's like, oh, okay, Colorado Trail. Maybe that's a bypass we can utilize. And I looked at the heat map, and there was no Strava activity on the Colorado Trail, which kind of surprised me to begin with. But then I got to thinking about it. It's like, oh, I bet that's wilderness area. And I haven't verified that yet, but I went to the Colorado Trail website, and basically the dirt roads that I have mapped out here is the Colorado Trail bypass onto this 77 Tarryall Road up here. So I'm guessing, yes, this is wilderness area where the Colorado Trail is closed to bicyclists. And the reroutes were on these fantastic dirt roads with these fantastic views over here. And then the Colorado Trail routing goes up the paved Tarryall Road here. So that's an option for us, but that's not my style of routing. We try to minimize pavement whenever it's possible. And so I started looking at things, and we do have some forest roads and other options up through here that may go down to this Tarryall Road occasionally for short stretches where there is no option, but not where you're doing pavement the whole time. So now I have to look at it and see, is this an actual viable route before I go up there and play around in the mountains. I know it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. And the main thing is to not run into dead ends and basically waste a half a day and have to start over from scratch. So I like to know ahead of time if it looks viable or not. And so my way to do that for areas that I'm completely unfamiliar with or close to completely unfamiliar with, what I will do is I will export from Ride with GPS. Like I said, this is a trick of the trade. If you're this deep into today's video, you're going to learn some new stuff here. And the Google Earth KML file, I will download that. And on this computer, I have Google Earth Pro downloaded to the computer. You can't do the web version. You have to do the desktop version to accomplish it, as far as I know, anyway. And then, so I download the file. I open the file. It automatically opens Google Earth at this point. We close this pop-up menu. We don't need that. So it has automatically imported that route into Google Earth. So that by itself, that's kind of cool. I can play around in Google Earth and look at things in more detail and do all sorts of things. But this is not a Google Earth tutorial. This is a very specific feature of Google Earth capabilities and how I use them for scouting routes. So when I can show the sidebar, the toolbar here's my file, do the drop down here. And don't ask me the whys and wherefores. And this is just stuff I figured out on how to do this over the years. I have to go to this next level of file in the temporary places. And this over here is a play button. So I'm going to play the tour. And I'm going to close that window just so we basically have a full screen view. This is just where this particular plot started. And now it's heading north on that Terryall Road. And I'm going to speed it up a touch. And then what I will do, I will just let Google Earth run. And you don't want to do this for a 500-mile route. You'll be sitting here watching it all day. You can speed it up and slow it down and pause. And we may do that along the way. Then this part of the paved road, I drove this to get to the original segment. So it's the same through this part. Going north like this, the original way we had it laid out, you'll take a right off of this Terryall Road. Then the alternate that I've mapped out and we're looking at together now, we're gonna hang a left up the paved road for a bit. Driving this section of paved road when I did, very little traffic. As paved roads go, it's about as nice as you can get. And see, we're not long, and we're hanging a left and going into the forest lands. We have a little bit of terrain features that are showing. So I'm watching the track, but you can see where it's overlaying with the Forest Service roads that are in here. Obviously when it's wooded, you lose some detail, but I'm not really looking for the specifics. I'm not trying to see how rocky this road may be or how rutted it may be. I'm just looking to make sure that it's continuous, and when there's an intersection with other roads, there's not a gate there or something like that, to see if it's well worn in. Because here's an example here. Like, we'll zoom in on this a little bit. So this is the way the map had it going, and that seems to work fine there. Looks like there's some kind of runoff area or water holding area. And I'm guessing it's one of two things. And there could be some terrain to this. So I'm thinking this might be a higher spot here, and this is a low spot. And maybe sometimes when it's wet, this might hold some water here. And this is a higher ground go around that some people use. Or it may just be people in Jeeps and four-wheelers and stuff like that going off the road area and playing around, which that part would be less than ideal. My guess is it's a go around when this is a wet, sloppy area, because this looks a little wide here. So more than likely this probably holds water when it's wet. And when it's holding water here, people may take this higher line as an alternate to avoid the wet. So we'll go ahead and turn it back on, get back up to speed. But to this point, it has been continuous. Now right here, there's not as much visible dirt road. Like back here, you can see where the dirt road jumps out. It jumps out here as well. A little faded through here, but that also just may be terrain. It looks like maybe a little bit of a rockier area. Maybe it just has a little bit of a dirt road texture right through this section here. But it's something that I would be aware of. It's like, maybe it doesn't get used as much through that area for some reason. And I may end up looking at one of these go-arounds. Like this one doesn't look like it really goes anywhere to help us out. But if this ends up being a deal breaker for some reason, looks like this might be an alternate we can use to get back over here if needed, sort of thing. So something I just keep in mind. That said, I'm not seeing anything that jumps out at me as a deal breaker. Just something I want to be aware of going into it. So we'll turn the play function back on, zooming along. Again, the road seems to be pretty well established. Now this little bypass here, the way I mapped it originally, just based on, that gives me cause for concern right there, particularly when you have a nice solid dirt road here. Most likely, I'll still try, when I scout it, I'll still see if that goes through. But we can look at this bypass right over here already and see that realistically, if this doesn't work, and like this right here, this goes right by a couple of houses. Actually, this tells me right away that this is a no-no. This is probably a private drive area. So when I get done with this, I'll probably go back to the maps and adjust this map to make sure it stays on the Forest Service Road. That might have been an auto routing click that I didn't follow closely enough. Yeah, it looks like that's going into private property there. So that's an easy enough adjustment. I'll go back to the map itself, drag this over here, and we're back on what should be the public roads route. And yeah, definitely a couple of residences there. It looks like there might be fence line all the way around it. No big deal. The public roads just come back over here. So we'll pick that up, go back up to speed. Everything's looking good so far. Now we're definitely onto a primary road of some sort. I see cars on it. My guess is this one isn't a Forest Service road. This is probably a county road right here. So there's really nothing to look at closely here. We know this is getting us from point A to point B without any issues. We'll see when it makes its next turn. There's, I know we are going, okay, so there's a turn there. Little bit skinnier road, but obviously well established. A little bit more terrain, a little bit more windy. That looks like a fun little ride right there. Some rock formations off to the left. A little bit of a creek crossing right here just for giggles. We'll zoom in on this. So that looks somewhat adventurous up this way. It looks like we have a creek crossing of some sort right here. And we'll go ahead and start playing again at a slower pace because we are definitely turning off a primary road into something a little less defined, but let's see what we're working with. It still looks pretty good. We'll zoom in on that. Yeah, that looks solid there. Over zoomed a bit there. Just ignore that. So I'm still pretty happy with that road. Definitely winding through some terrain here, following the contour of the land, which is usually fun. A little bit of double track. Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking this out. I'm guessing this is Forest Service Road here, which means that a good chance it'll be bumpy and rocky, but also a very solid road, and it goes right on to that Terriall Road, and there's a way I can do this. So I can go into Google Street View right here. And we can look up here. Now from that vantage point, let's go a little bit further this way if it lets us. Might have to click, click, click. There we go. Yeah, so that's telling us that's definitely a Forest Service road there. That's a Forest Service road sign telling us what type of vehicles and usage it's open to. And I'm guessing this is an older street view image because when you look at the more recent satellite views of this is all blacktop with striping and everything like that. So we'll go ahead and exit Street View and go back to our autoplay feature. And we're going to be We're going to be on the, see, you can see the blacktop and double lines on the satellite view here. So that street view image was a little bit older than the satellite views. Crank the speed up a notch again. So we are on the paved road for a little bit here. But we're also in a canyon area with good elevation and terrain on each side of us. And I think it tightens up a little bit more as we get a little bit further into it. And there's a lot of public lands in this area, so there's a lot of public already established campgrounds. Obviously, in national forest and BLM lands, you can pretty much free camp wherever you want to, but the public camping areas, if you're looking for a little bit of company or meet up with somebody potentially, or if you just need a vault toilet to use every once in a while instead of digging in a cat hole or whatever else, sometimes a facility of some sort is useful. And again, if nothing else, it might make for a good meetup spot if you have a support crew or something along those lines. So we'll let this do its thing for a little bit. And well, there we go. We weren't on it as long as I thought. And then we take a left and we're back up. And we're going over the reservoir itself right now. That's the Terrial. And if I'm mispronouncing it, which I probably am, somebody will correct me, and I appreciate that correction. The Terrial Reservoir there. And this winds up above it. Still a lot of terrain we're working with. Now this is kind of interesting. I'm wondering if there were forest fires in this area not terribly long ago, because I know the elevation here should not be above tree line. I think the highest elevation through here was like 9,500 feet. Most of it was closer to 8,500. But there's no trees here for some reason, and it could just be the area. Maybe it's more of a high desert type spot. So that'll be one of the things when we scout it. We'll get more familiar with lots of exposed rock up here. That's not. I'm always a fan of exposed rock, but no trees. This is interesting that there's no trees. There's a little bit of tree action there. My guess is there was some fire activity prior to this satellite imagery, and that does take a while to recover from. I know the eastern side where I originally routed through, there had definitely been some fires in a good bit of that. So it's probably the same fire. Maybe it was more intense over here and now that wound through, and now we're back on more of a main county road. And see, there's plenty of trees here. So now I'm curious. I want to go out there and scout it right away, because there's lots of bare areas here, which is kind of unusual in this area, in this neck of the woods. And now we're in a residential area, which was planned. I knew this was going into a neighborhood, so to speak. And this will wind back down to that main highway, the Terrial Road. But also when you come out of this neighborhood, it hooks a left onto that Terrial Road. And at least on the map, there was a store right there, which we do try to route to where there's some sort of reload capability, amenities, whenever possible. So here's the left to the main road, and right there's the store if you see it. Now, that said, that's what shows up on the map now. And this is a new section. And this actually winds up to where the Colorado Trail comes out. And my guess is this is probably a pretty well used road through here. So I'm pretty confident this is going to go through. There's a car there. And that's always a good sign as well. When you see vehicles on the action, there's another car there. Oh, several cars there. Yeah. Okay. Oh, here's something I want to show you. So these little kips off the side of the road, that's water drainage. When you see that much kip action, that's actually that's a pretty good grade right there. So basically this is the downhill side of the mountain, and when it goes through that turn, they're wanting water to wash off this way. When it goes through that way, that way, that way. Um, it means it's a pretty good climb or descent, obviously, depending on which direction you're going. But that also tells you that's a really well maintained road, that they want to keep that corridor open. Uh, so that I would consider this at this point, just based on the number of cars I've already seen on it and this maintenance, that this is a pretty solid road, and it's probably pretty important to the Forest Service, possibly a county road. I can't remember off the top of my head, but usually when you see the water drainage like that, usually that's Forest Service and the way they do their stuff. We'll get the speed back up on this. This looks like a really, really fun road. Good water drainage there, more runoff there. Off to the right is where it meets up with the Colorado Trail, I believe. And there's a couple more cars right there. And this is this same, another couple cars there. Obviously, a Colorado Trail is very popular with hikers in that section, and the wilderness. I'm almost certain it's got to be wilderness area in there. There's another car. So this is, there's no doubt that from that general store, when we got back on the pavement to here, and there's another car. This is coming out on 285, if I remember correctly. This is a no-brainer, rock solid part of the route. So even if the other stuff that I mapped out ends up not working, I know there's a 99.9% chance that as long as I can get to this section one way or another, we're good getting to 285. And this is where it turns on to 285. And look at all this traffic. So this section that we're on here on the west side of Grant, almost all of this, there's a really good shoulder on both sides of the road, also with rumble strips between the traffic lanes and the shoulder. I want to say it's at least a 4-foot shoulder outside of the rumble strip, maybe a 6 or 8-foot one. So I'm definitely more comfortable with people riding the shoulder through this section. There's no way to not do 285. Tons of cars there. That's some kind of trailhead or something. Maybe there was an event going on there that day. I'm guessing this is weekend satellite imagery. This is probably more vehicle traffic than I've seen on this stretch of road, except for Sunday afternoon, evening, and that's almost all going the other way, going back towards Denver and Boulder and all that on 285. But this will get you from that Tarryall Road area, the Tarryall Reservoir area, up to Grant. Unfortunately, there's not that I can find, is there any way to do dirt roads into Grant? You have to do 285 for 6 or 7 miles one way or the other is what it boils down to. And my first impression is I'm going to be a lot more comfortable pointing people towards the west side with shoulder on 285. But like I said, Strava heat map shows actually more bicycle activity on the east side of Grant on 285, which is somewhat surprising to me. But again, maybe Colorado drivers are much more cyclist friendly and cycling aware than what we're used to. Well, I know they are, than what we're used to in Texas. And there's Grant right there. So based on what we've seen, I'm pretty confident that this will be a viable route. Once I get up there and wheels in the dirt and checking it out in real life, I could be completely off base and we may get shut down. Usually that's not the case. This little preview that we did here, that usually shows me, if nothing else, that at least it's viable to get all the way through one way or another. There may be something, again, here, so here's 285 on the other side of Grant as an example. There is no shoulder. I say no shoulder. There's a couple of short sections of shoulder in this, but most of it between Grant and Shawnee is no shoulder, like this climb here. I think there's some, there's an example. There's some shoulder here. And this is one short section on the east side, whereas almost all of the west side has this shoulder. So if you're watching this video and you're familiar with the area and you're comfortable riding 285 on the east side of Grant, please comment, let me know, give me that feedback. That's where me being from outside the area, you know, I have to go with my best guess on things like that. But if we can get some actual beta from people that know this area inside and out and what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with, things like that are greatly appreciated. So there's your tricks of the trade tool for the day. Again, it's the Ride with GPS export file, and the type of file we're downloading is the Google Earth, the .kml. And you do need to have Google Earth Pro installed on the desktop computer. I know it works in Windows environment. I haven't tried it on the Mac yet, but I believe it works on, I will call it 98.7% sure that it works in the Mac environment as well. But I have not yet used it in Mac. All right. We're going to sign off this section now and do some editing and add it to the other video on down the road. Thanks for spending some time with us.